sorry, which I should have said recording this meeting. I said it earlier. And if, yeah, sorry. And he's presently a professor of philosophy at Belgorod University. So that's his current profession. But he's actually been working with Ilyenkov's daughter, his only daughter, I believe, who is the owner of the archive. And over the last years, they've been publishing in Russian the collected works of Ilyenkov, which unfortunately we don't have yet in English. So we are very happy and privileged to have an insight from Andrey into what he has discovered. And a number of you have sent questions in advance, which he's got, and he's going to answer those questions. And if there's time at the end, we will take some further questions, but we should start with the ones that Andrey's been able to digest and prepare replies to. So thank you very much for your patience, and over to Andrey.
Thank you, Karina. Well, I have several questions, and I will insert them into dialogue chat for not to speak, not to read them aloud. Well, the question from Karina about Leninist dialectics. There is no such text entitled Leninist dialectics. There is an oddly called manuscript materialism militant, that means dialectical, from which a certain editor has compiled a book, Leninist dialectics. This book was commissioned to Ilyenkov by Politizdat publisher in view of the 70th anniversary of the publication of Materialism and Imperial Criticism. Ilyenkov agreed, but suggested that his younger friend Grigory Vodolazov write it as a co-author. Vodolazov, by the way, he is still alive, was to write chapters on Lenin's disputes with Bogdanov and the Marxists on political issues, and Ilyenkov on philosophical issues. However, Vodolazov didn't meet the deadline. Ilyenkov's archive retains the 16-page typewritten letter from Vodolazov, in which he says that he would like to explore Lenin's disputes with Plekhanov and the Mensheviks as well. But this work will take a year or two. Vodolazov suggests that Ilyenkov should publish his philosophical part right away. And in the second edition, Vodolazov will add his political part. Ilyenkov's manuscript, Militant Materialism, is a draft, 159 pages, plus some inserts, 19 pages. He didn't have time to finish the work. There is an insert, for example, The Legend of the Vampires, criticizing socialism on Mars in Bogdanov's sci-fi novels. Also, Ilyenkov was going to insert into Materialism Militant his pamphlet against Ukrainev, the director of the Institute of Philosophy, whom he considered a modern successor of Bogdanov and the Russian Marxists. Overall, the book should have much larger in size. After Ilyenkov's death, the editor of Politizdat took his drafts and made a book, we know. It was the editor who gave it the title Leninist Dialectics. He threw something out, then added some linking phrases, and after editing, Ilyenkov's manuscript became a historical philosophical essay. Meanwhile, Ilyenkov and Vodolazov wanted to write a book against subjectivism in the present-day communist movement. It was not a historical philosophical aim before them. And Ilyenkov personally believed that the contemporary socialism in both its variants, in Soviet and Chinese variants, represented Bogdanovщина, that is leftist school projects, practical voluntarism, and subjectivism. Ilyenkov's criticism against Bogdanov is a criticism of contemporary society. This main idea has practically disappeared from the printed version of his book. At least I didn't manage to discern it myself until I got to Ilyenkov's home market. And the English edition is a direct and very good translation of the Russian editions. And of course, it is also very far from Ilyenkov's intention. We have a question. Modern Bogdanov trend in socialism. Ilyenkov considered that Bogdanov, modern contemporary socialism is a product of development of Bogdanov thought, not Lenin's ideas of cultural evolution, etc. Ukraintsev is the director of the Philosophy Institute. I will talk about him later. The next question is there any correspondence or documentation? No, there are no such documents in the whole market. Perhaps his wife, Ilyenkov's wife, had them in her archive. The next question. A few years ago, I published that pamphlet by Ilyenkov against the director of the Institute of Philosophy. Ilyenkov renamed Ukraintsev to Uprямtsev or Bezumtsev, to translate it into English, stubborn or madman. Ilyenkov drew evil cartoons of Ukraintsev in the wall newspaper of the Institute of Philosophy. And Ilyenkov didn't wage any other struggle than these cartoons and satire, as far as I know. All the more so, he was far from fighting for political change in the USSR. The struggle was waged by liberal dissidents whose views were completely aligned to Ilyenkov. Although he surely would have wanted freedom of speech and the press in the USSR too, as the liberals, but no more points of touch between them. The fourth question. Understand what authorities, which ones, the higher party authorities never pursued Ilyenkov. It wouldn't take much for them to grind him down if they were really angry against him. Ilyenkov, of course, had a mutual hatred with Ukraintsev and his team. He had conflicts with former directors of the Institute of Philosophy, especially Fedoseev. But two directors, Kedorov and Kopnin, was Ilyenkov's friends and associates, and he felt good at that time. Of course, Fedoseev couldn't pass the scandalous case with the Italian edition of Ilyenkov's book, together with Dr. Zhivago by Pasternak. It should be understood that Fedoseev could but subject Ilyenkov to an execution for this. But it was in his power to fire Ilyenkov and morally destroy him. But Ilyenkov continued to work at the institute in Fedoseev times and after that. So it was not such a constant persecution from authorities. Regarding the letter to the Central Committee on the situation of philosophy, we don't know if this letter was sent. Even Novokhatka, Ilyenkov's graduate student and publisher of his works, didn't know of the existence of the letter. And there is nothing in this letter so to greatly anger the authorities. The weakness of the political economy of socialism was evident, and everyone was talking about it, and I heard the same talks myself in the philosophy department. And Andropov, the general secretary, once said, "We don't know the country we live in," about the Soviet Union. So Ilyenkov didn't say something so special. And the next question is long enough. Yelena Ilish is a little sick right now, and she sends her regards to us. Oops. Oh. Indeed, the book you mentioned contains some very interesting documents from the 1950s, but we don't know if it is possible to translate this into English and if it makes sense to retell this material in an interview. I could provide an electronic text in Russian, which can be translated in parts using DeepL.com. DeepL.com is the best Russian English translator, I recommend. The question from Gabriel about the differences. Well, Soviet philosophy has always been a maidservant of ideology. But in different years, the ideological pressure might have been stronger or weaker. From 1931 until Stalin's death in 1953, this pressure was so strong that any living philosophical thought was preserved almost exclusively in aesthetics. Mikhail Lifshitz and Georg Lukács were the stars of philosophy at that times in Soviet Union. After the 20th Congress, there was about 8 or 10 years of relative freedom of philosophizing. This was the time of Ilyenkov's creative flowering, a thaw period in our history. According to Ilyenkov, Stalin crucified dialectics on a cross of 4 features from Stalin's work on historical and dialectical materialism. Everything in the world is interconnected, everything is constantly moving, etc. This Stalin's dialectical materialism was a mortified philosophy, a philosophical corpse only. It hardly makes sense to compare it with Ilyenkov's dialectical logic as an ascent from the abstract to the concrete, etc. The question from Kirill. Ilyenkov's failed to publish a good half of what he wrote. But after his death, all his major manuscripts were published. 4 volumes were edited by Novokhatka. The materials which have been published now for the first time in the collected works are not Ilyenkov's most important works. Both 2 his dissertations, for example, turned into books. But there are some fine reflections in these works that are absent in his books, especially in the second dissertation on German classical philosophy. Another example, Novokhatka published Ilyenkov's major manuscript, which criticizes the socialism of Adam Schaff, a Polish scholar, which, according to Ilyenkov, was another modern version of Bogdanov's Martian socialism on Mars planet. But Ilyenkov wrote much more on this subject, on Adam Schaff. There is a whole folder of papers on Schaff, over 300 typewritten pages. Novokhatka published only about 20 or 30 pages. So it's one third, of 10% of manuscripts by Ilyenkov on Adam Schaff. There is a lot of important and interesting stuff there. By the way, there is no English translation of Ilyenkov anti-Schaff criticism, and no any translation, as far as I know, of these important drafts. In general, no new sensational materials should be expected after what Novokhatka has already published. Absolutely new text, approximately 1,000 book pages, not counting dissertations. But these are mainly small papers written for himself, lectures, reviews of others, doctoral theses, and so on. The question from Anders. About Stalinism. Ilyenkov considered Stalinism and Maoism is a necessary and inevitable stage of the communist movement in the very poor and backward countries where the normal capitalism has not been built. Marx called this Gerohe communismus, the crude or rude communism. And Ilyenkov tried to show the theoretical basis, theoretical foundation of all these crude leftist forms of the communist movement in the contemporary socialism camp, including USSR. Here is the source for his criticism against Bogdanov, Artur Koestler, Adam Schaff, Mao. By the way, Ilyenkov's manuscripts on Mao's philosophy were firstly published in the 4th volume of the collective works in full, because in the journals «Вопросы философии» and the questions of philosophy and communist, in these journals, Ilyenkov's manuscripts were subjected to the very, very harsh censorship, censoring, and any parallels of Soviet socialism with Mao, with the Chinese socialism, were deleted by the editors, and the main aims, the main ideas of Ilyenkov were extracted from his works, from his articles. The next question. Monism versus pluralism. I'm not sure that I understand this exactly the sense of the expression reality is fractured. Ilyenkov was a Spinozist, in this question. The unique nature substance manifests itself in the infinitely various forms, which Engels called forms of movement, of matter's movement. And each of these forms is the subject of a special science. But there is one more important moment which is connected with the practical activity of man, and Ilyenkov's pupil Lev Naumenko wrote a book, Monism as a Principle of Dialectical Logic, about this problem, about the problem of subject matter of sciences. I think that I believe that Naumenko's book stands in one row with Ilyenkov's book. It is a brilliant piece of work. And Ilyenkov himself, when he read Naumenko's book, said that it is not so не страшно и умереть. It is not so terrible to die now, because there is a pupil who continues his work at the level, at the very good level in dialectical logic. Unfortunately, Naumenko devoted all his life to party work in the Central Committee apparatus, and so on. The next question. About civilization, I can't find in Ilyenkov's works some special theory of civilization, and I can't say to which extent your concept of civilization is close to Ilyenkov's concept of the ideal. ethology. Interesting question. But Ilyenkov read scientific popular journal, some works on animal psychology, but he was not good in ethology. But in his manuscripts, there is a comment on Harlow and Suomi, their exercises, their experiments with isolation of chimpanzee, total isolation or partial isolation, and Ilyenkov made the article on this topic in his in the journal Science and Life, and commented it with great interest. But what I can say that with absolute certainty that there is no ideal in Ilyenkov's sense. There is no ideal in the animal world, if we understand the ideal according to Ilyenkov, of course. Ilyenkov not once told about this, not once and not twice. Ideal is the form of social labor and a form of the state in the most broad, in the broadest Plato's sense, as a form of civilization. All talks about the ideal in the animal world is a biological fetishism, if to draw a parallel with the commodity fetishism in the capital. And certainly this requirement of culture still holds. But it depends, Kirill, how we understand the ideal. The ideal could be understood entirely different, in an entirely different sense than Ilyenkov understood it. So, but Ilyenkov was sure that ideality is a differentia specifica of the human being. The next question. About the attached manuscript. I know it, I found this manuscript in Ilyenkov's archive, and I asked a friend to translate it into Russian. As a small investigation revealed, its author is Helmut Seidel, an Ilyenkov student from German Democratic Republic. He uses Ilyenkov's work and even his characteristic expression, beautiful ideal, the beautiful ideal. So firstly, it seemed to me that Ilyenkov wrote this text, but the author's initials, HS, were found there in one place. So it is definitely the work of Helmut Seidel. By the way, Ilyenkov, in co-authorship with Seidel and Naumenka, wrote a review on Lukach's book on the young Hegel in 1955. From Martin, the question from Martin. Can we expect unknown works to appear? I've already answered that question partly. The best works have already been published by Novokhatka. However, not everything has been translated into foreign languages. In English and German, for example, there is still no a book on idols and ideals. And the first translation into French of the full original version of dialectics of the abstract and the concrete is in preparation in Delga editions. It was published in Russian only in 1997, the full version of the book, which was prohibited by Fedoseev. Fedoseev made Ilyenkov to totally rewrite the text of this book, unfortunately, and abridged and shortened this book to a great extent. The next question. About Ilyenkov's essays on Hegel and Frankfurt School. I don't know how well Ilyenkov knew the works of the Frankfurt School, but he was very interested in Western Marxism and read quite a lot in German, quite a lot. His review of Ernst Bloch's book on Hegel and of Lukács's anthology will appear soon in volume 6 of the collected works. I've completed just now this volume, and I'm going to send it to the editor, to the publisher. His home library includes Karel Kosik's book, The Dialectics of the Concrete, and Adam Schaff's book, Marxism and the Human Individual, and something else. There are no books by Adorno in the library, but in one article on Hegel, Ilyenkov speaks very critically about Adorno and Marcuse. You can also find something about the negative dialectics in Ilyenkov's English collection, Intelligent Materialism, translated by Evgeny Pavlov, pages 49 and 50. Did Ilyenkov read Frankfurt School, Yugoslav Praxis School, Lukács School, Karel Kosik? Yes, but only the works that were translated into German, and it was not so many books which he could read. But Ilyenkov received the proposal, the invitation to the editorial board of Praxis Journal, but he couldn't give a positive answer, of course, to this invitation, because it would be the end of his philosophical career in the USSR. As for Lukács, Ilyenkov studied several books by Lukács, and as soon as Lukács's final book, Ontology of the Social Being, appeared in print after Lukács's death, Ilyenkov immediately tried to get it and made a special note for translation or referrative note. Next question about, and the last question about the cosmology of the spirit or mind. It's a very intriguing story. I made a special investigation to define the sources of the cosmology of spirit. And of course, Ilyenkov had read, or rather said, studied Bogdanov's writings, including his fantasy novels. Ilyenkov loved science fictions and dystopias. He was especially fond of stories about thinking machines, robots, and he made an abstract of Karol Čapek's essay on inventors. In his favorite journal, The New World, 2 reviews of sci-fi books were found, signed Ed Waldman. I'm pretty sure that Ilyenkov is their author, a real author. It was a pseudonym. Finally, he wrote himself a fantasy story, but he persistently but unsuccessfully tried to have printed this story in the New World Journal. There are 11 different versions of the story, The Mystery of the Black Box, a sci-fi prelude, in his home market. Ilyenkov will include it in his book on idols and ideals. As for the riddle of cosmology of the spirit, it deserves a special conversation, not today, I guess. I managed to find the primary source of this work in Maximilian Voloshin's poem, Paths of Cain. Cain, in Russian Cain. This poem was written in 1920s, 100 years ago. There is an amateur English translation, and I made an English translation of the key point by myself. Sorry for my English, but in Russian and in English, where the key idea of Ilyenkov's cosmology of spirit is very definitely formulated. Blow up the earth and make it to be a new sun. And it is not the only fragment which reminds us about the cosmology of mind. There are several very and Ilyenkov quoted Voloshin's poem in his book on idols and ideals. So he loved to visit Koktebel in Crimea, small town where Voloshin lived at the end of his life. So that's all. Maximilian Voloshin, yes, Russian poet. The best, the Passes of Cain is the best for me, is the best poem and the best understanding of Russian Revolution in the world literature. The great philosophical poem which Voloshin wrote it, was right in it. for more than 10 years. This poem. Thank you for your attention. I can't hear you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Should we see if we can take just a few more? Is that okay to take just some more questions? Just, yeah, if there are any final questions that Andrey hasn't covered, although okay, thank you for your detailed answers. So if anyone else does have, Ralph?
It just occurs to me if Ilyenkov maybe had any links with or other people referred to him in the Samizdat. That would be one question. And secondly, did Ilyenkov have access to works written in Russian but were censored in the USSR, like Samyatin's We, for example? In other words, to what extent did Ilyenkov have access to underground or was appreciated in underground sources?
Yes, Ilyenkov had access to many samizdat and underground literature, so many sources, books by Solzhenitsyn. He liked very much the forbidden poet Galich, and a portrait of Solzhenitsyn was on his in his cabinet for some time, and he in his life there are many books, not many books, but several books forbidden in the Soviet times in his home library, including his favorite novel by George Orwell, 1984. He even tried to translate it into Russian. That was a criminal action at his times, to translate Orwell. And he has a samizdat version, a very good translation of Orwell, which is Зачитан до дыр, очень very frequently read. But as for Zamyatin, I don't know.
I'm sorry. What about the Czech author Karl Čapek? Is you familiar with him?
Čapek. Čapek, he commented and made an abstract of Čapek's work on inventors. But I can say any more about his acquaintance with Čapek's. But Ruhr, of course, he mentioned Ruhr, R-U-R, in his abstract.
And there's a question from Andrew Brown as well. Andrew's asking, what was Ilyenkov's general assessment of Lukács and on specifically Lukács on dialectics?
Sorry.
What did Ilyenkov think about Lukács? So you said there was a review of Lukács. What is it that
think about a review of what? Sorry, to write maybe will be better.
Там уже написан вопрос от Эйдл Браун.
Assessment.
Не последний, а вот зеленый там.
A general assessment of Lukács on dialectics. Ilyenkov interpreted Lukács in a very special way. He treated ontology as a history, as ontological as a historical, but very doubtful interpretation. And Ilyenkov не переносил Kant.
Standard.
And ontology was a prohibited word for Ilyenkov, but as in case of Lukács, he interpreted it in a better sense. And well, he was inspired by Lukács's book on Hegel, and he considered this book the best what was written about Hegel from Marxists.
And just to say, I'm not sure
why ontology was forbidden word, because the separation of ontology and gnoseology or epistemology was a Kantian had a Kantian ground for Ilyenkov, and he was sure that Hegel, after Hegel, there can't be any ontology as a special philosophical discipline.
So he was against separation of practical reason and theoretical reason.
Theoretical reason.
Because I think Ilyenkov keeps this separation of practical reason and theoretical, because he keeps separation of ratiocination and reason, right? So he was against separation of ontology and gnoseology on different grounds.
Well, the real ontology of social being is political economy.
Okay, understand. Great. This is great. Yeah, thank you.
I would probably recommend to Miguel that if he goes on our YouTube channel, he can have a look at the presentation from Andrew Brown, where he talks about some post-cognitivist ideas. I'm not sure if Andrey would have opinions about ecological psychology, but yes, there are interesting links there. Anyone else? Anything else we haven't talked about? I did have my own question. So you spoke a lot about Bogdanov, and you explained that in some way it was an attack on many people working in philosophy at that time. Ilyenkov is also very critical of another Maoist in his work. He's very critical of Carnap, and there I can understand the attack, but how true is it that Maoism or Bogdanov actually did have an effect, or did have an important role in philosophy at that time? So was it that he was comparing it to Bogdanov or Mac, or were they really interested in these thinkers?
Ilyenkov was not very accurate in unifying or in combining different thinkers into a row, into a camp, and he considered Bogdanov as a subjectivist, and so all thinkers that like Adam Schaff, who speak about the subjective force of government, the constructing socialism from сверху,
From the top, yeah.
from the top. Were subjectivists for Ilyenkov, like he used the term positivist for many people who were not positivists, neo-positivists or positivists. So, but Ilyenkov called them all positivists.
Thank you. And Karina, yeah, if you have a question.
Thank you. Andrey, can you explain why Idols and Ideals was so much suppressed? Why did Feodosiev not want to publish it? And when was it first written? And also, second question, it seems that Ilyenkov had two people that persecuted him. One was Fedosiev, and the other was Ukraintsev. I believe at different times. And maybe you could explain that a bit more. Thank you.
The book on Idols and Ideals was written by Ilyenkov in the early 60s. It is compiled from his articles for Philosophical Encyclopedia, which can't be published in the volumes of this edition. But the publication was delayed for about 4 or 5 years for uncertain reason, and it was the only Ilyenkov social study that was published during his lifetime. Ilyenkov works on social issues were censored or prohibited by the authorities. Ilyenkov had a bad reputation, and publishers didn't want to have risks. Especially Politizdat, where Ilyenkov published all his books. What were seminars in Obninsk? All that I know about his Obninsk seminars, that Obninsk is a town where Soviet secret physicists or physics worked, and all I know is from Naumenko's stories about his Ilyenkov's Obninsk trips. Naumenko told me that he had tape recordings of Ilyenkov's lectures in Obninsk, but they were lost. All these recordings were lost, unfortunately. The answer from Andy. Ontology, relevant to Western debates. Okay, that is not a question. Naumenka worked in Normansk, okay.
Great. Any final question before we finish for today?
Yes, I would like to ask one more question. I don't. Corina talked about the enemies of Ilyenkov. I wanted to know if there was like also a group of friends or companions of Ilyenkov in the Moscow University. I'm thinking, for example, about Viktor Vasiulin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I read two of his books, which are the dialectics, the logic in the capital of Karl Marx, and the logic of history. I think he was a philosophy professor, but who worked in history. If you know something about, he cites Ilyenkov a few times in his books. So and he worked in the Moscow University at the same time. So I don't know if you are aware of his works, or if there was like a connection between the two.
Оля, это фамилия этого я выпала из головы. Вазюлин. Vasiulin respected Ilyenkov, and I suppose Ilyenkov respected Vasiulin too. But Ilyenkov never cited or mentioned Vasiulin in his written works. I don't know about Ilyenkov's attitude to Vasiulin, so I can say nothing. I can say nothing interesting on this topic. Sorry.
Martin was asking, were there any other philosophers who were friends or supporters of Ilyenkov at the time?
Yes, there were many philosophers, Ilyenkov pupils in Almaty, Kazakhstan, in Rostov-on-Don, where I had my education. And in many dozens of Ilyenkov admirers in the USSR, but they can't support Ilyenkov substantially. But he also had his friends in the higher spheres, such as academicians, Kedrov, Kapnin, I mentioned them, and he had many friends indeed, but in 70s all his friends died or made a step aside.
Thanks. I guess if we could make this the last question, there's a question from Felipe. I'm not sure what exactly it's referring to, but can you see the question from Felipe in the chat, Andrey? Yeah.
Discussions with Zinoviev, very interesting topic. We have very little evidences of that discussions, but they were very brutal and Ilyenkov and Zinoviev were friends, were very close friends, but they were enemies in philosophy, real enemies, especially after Zinoviev became anti-Marxist in 60s. But as far as I know, Zinoviev never wrote about Ilyenkov a bad word, no bad word about Ilyenkov. But in Ilyenkov's archive, there are some documents where Ilyenkov argued against Sashka. It's уменьшительно, diminutive, Russian Sasha, Alexander. But he is very respectful to Zinoviev. Ilyenkov even didn't call him positivist.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all of those, and thank you for the questions. I guess, Karina, back to you to close.
Thank you, Kirill. Thank you, Andrey. It's been an amazing discussion. I thought it might be good for a couple of minutes to maybe hand over to Martin first, because he's been in touch with translators from Spanish, and he's been publishing some of Ilyenkov's writings in Spanish for the first time, I believe. And maybe he would like to say a few words about that. Maybe if you would like to say something, Martin.
Okay, thank you, Corinna. Yes, we recently published 3 essays of Ilyenkov in this little book, which we called finally Cosmology and Communism, which is the Cosmology, the essay Our School Should Teach How to Think. I think it's called like that in English. And finally, the Dialectics of the Ideal. And I already told Corinna that it would perhaps be interesting in the future make a session about the theme that 2 of these texts have been translated by a group of Cuban professors, which in the 80s came to Russia. I think one of them to Ukraine. So they learned Russian and they translated then the works of Ilyenkov into Spanish. But they were never published in Cuba. So they told me, I was in contact with some of them, they just used it for their classes, like class material. So it was never officially published, neither in Cuba, nor in Latin America, nor in Spain. So it would perhaps very interesting to get to know a little bit more the ways that the texts of Ilyenkov's have taken to come finally to other languages. So it's the first time that they are appearing in Latin American Spanish, but I don't have now the book, but also in December, a Spanish collective, which is called Dos Cuadrados, which are also, by the way, we are publishing it here in Peru. I'm talking to you from Peru. So they have published, they're making a 2-volume publishing project from Ilyenkov's works in Madrid. So it's a group of other philosophers, I believe, in Madrid, where they also, in the first volume that appeared in December, there's also the Cosmology, there's the Dialectics of the Ideal and Ideals and Idols. So there's if you see, we also put Hegel in this Cosmology. We have, it's a little bit like a marketing joke, because if we would put Ilyenkov on the front cover, nobody would know who he is because Ilyenkov is very little known here in Latin America. So we hope to be able to promote a little bit his works here in Peru. And we're also making contact with the friends of Spain. So hopefully there's coming out some interesting projects in the future. That's what I can say till now. So I'm looking forward to make with Corinna perhaps the contacts with the Cubans. We also had Cubans. I invited them to the meeting today, but I believe it's a little bit difficult for them to be able to connect them to internet. But hopefully in the future we can make like a session on the arriving of Ilyenkov's texts slowly but surely here to America, Latin America.
Martin, are the translators using the original documents? Yes, or are they using other translations?
That's something we still want to find out. For example, the Cosmology is a translation from a friend of Madrid, from the English translation of Giuliano. So that's the other two are translations directly from the Russian. I believe I showed you the link, the book. I cannot read it because I don't know the acrylic alphabet, but there's like a reference from which text they originally translated them. But I don't know, or we didn't figure out if it's like a censored text or the original or the text which was cut in pieces, because still the contact with the Cubans is very, very difficult. Perhaps I can put here in the link the original text. So perhaps Andrey perhaps knows the text from which it was originally translated. But it is a translation. The dialectics from the Ideal is a translation from 1985. So I put it here in the description, in the link. So perhaps Andrey knows from which.
Yes, but it is not the first publication of the dialectics of Ideal. The first was immediately after Ilyenkov's death in 1979 in Вопросы философии journal, in slightly abridged form.
Okay. So that is what we still know about the translations and about the texts. So hopefully, perhaps in the future, we can get these things to clear up a little bit.
Translations of the dialectics of the Ideal to English or
to Spanish. They translated it from the Russian, from this which I put here.
It's a good source, but the incomplete version.
Okay.
Of the Ideal, but not so much is absent.
Okay. So we know that now. Hopefully, we can in the future get a translation of the complete one, which is still. This is still the
edition is in Logos in Logos journal. I can send you this journal in this century.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you, Andrey. It's been very enlightening. And I have lots more questions, but there's no more time. And just to say to everybody again, thank you for participating. The recording of this will be on our YouTube channel soon. And also, if there's anybody here who wants to receive emails with updates, please put your email in the chat. And We haven't planned yet for this coming year, so we're going to have a planning meeting in February, the 4th probably, but we'll let you know about that.